Hey, my lovely, lovely, wonderful people, a pleasant afternoon to you. Now, I bought the Weekend Star yesterday, and I want to bring something to the fore because I want us to, especially for the both men and women, a lot of people are afraid to speak about things that are negative, meaning for example, if they look a particular way and they are financially in a rut, they don't want to have the conversation because of fear of being judged, because they don't look the part. How they look is not commensurate with how their finances are. So they look rich, but they're not rich. They look a particular way, but they're not that way. And they're afraid to say, this is my reality, even though I look this way. So I'm juxtaposing it to men who will suffer, especially as it relates to, their biggest thing is to be able to perform sexually, to be a sexual prowess, sexual, a guinea gog, what them call them, something like that. They must be so good that when there is a problem, they're afraid to say it because they don't want to be mocked, jeered, and laughed at. So this says suffering in silence, shame stopping infertile men from seeking help. So sometimes when you see some wives, girlfriends they're unable to conceive, it's not necessarily on their part. It's many times it's because of the man being infertile, and they love the man. They're not going to cheat on the man, so they end up not having children. So it says shame stopping infertile men from seeking help. Jamaica's declining population has long placed the spotlight largely on women, but the silence surrounding men has become impossible to ignore. Behind the jokes that men are firing blanks is a growing reality that many Jamaican men are quietly struggling with infertility. According to Health Minister Dr. Christopher Tufton, stigma and denial remain major barriers preventing men from accessing care. People feel it just can't be them. These issues we have to confront as a society if we are to address all components of health and good health, he said. The scale of the problem came into focus earlier this year. In February, a series of Star articles revealed an urgent demand for locally sourced sperm. I remember this case. Oh my goodness. And when the lady said most of the young men, 80% and counting, fired blanks. They could not be used in the fertility clinics in fairly recent times, just a few months ago. So locally sourced sperm, as fertility clinics increasingly struggle to meet the needs of couples trying to conceive. For years, clinics have relied heavily on imported sperm from countries such as the USA and Denmark. When a call was made for healthy young Jamaican men to donate, the response was strong. The results, however, were deeply troubling. Dr. Kamali, I remember her, Carol, founder of the Jamaica Fertility Clinic, revealed that up to 80% of men who stepped forward were found to have very low quality sperm, and most of them were young men. You see, on the day they talk about old man and I forgot to sit down, and you see there, a lot of your sperms are blanks. Oh boy, at least when those men were young, them never dare fire blanks. Many of them. Now in December, Tufton confirmed that male infertility is common and opined that it should be a concern for all. He disclosed that 1 in 4 couples seeking medical help for infertility are told they cannot conceive naturally. Nearly half of those cases involve male infertility. But he fears that the crisis is not just the statistics, it is a silence surrounding the condition. Some people suffer in silence because there is a stigma attached to infertility, and when it affects them, they hide from addressing it, said Tufton. He added that open discussion and public education are critical to changing that reality, noting that encouraging men to seek help can both reduce risks and lead to earlier treatment. Tufton explained that deep-rooted ideas of masculinity further complicate the problem. In a society where extreme masculine identity is encouraged, men may struggle to accept fertility challenges. In a macho society, men feel they cannot fire blanks. That's true. That is absolutely true, Tufton said, pointing out that such language is often used in a derogatory way, reinforcing shame and discouraging men from seeking medical support. We have to almost socially re-engineer how we think at the community level and within relationships. We need to encourage conversations from a public health perspective, moving beyond just taking medication to include family health planning. He noted that while conversations around family planning do take place, sensitive issues such as infertility are not usually placed on the public agenda. According to official data, Jamaica's crude birth rate declined from 21.7 live births per 1,000 people in 2000 to 11, wow, basically half, 11.4 in 2022. The country's fertility rate has fallen below the replacement level of 2.1 and now stands at 1.9. Tufton pointed out that declining birth rates are a global trend, but said that when combined with high levels of migration, the impact becomes even more troubling. You end up with a stagnant society from a population standpoint, which is true, he said. That has significant implications for the aging of the population. In other words, you have to have a replenishing of people, because you can't expect people at 80 to be operating like somebody 40 and doing the work of people in their 40s, because we do have an aging population. So people are living longer, but I mean, still, you need things, especially for productivity and growth to continue. You need younger people to be coming up and to be trained and to be mentored and to be in good health. Paul says, I wish for you to prosper above all, that and that your soul prospers. You see, once the soul is prospering, more than likely it will start to trigger the physical for the physical to prosper. That has significant implications for the aging of the population, the types of services that will be needed, obviously, the labor force, which I just mentioned, and the wider economy. It is a very real problem that we will have to confront. Men, especially, gone are the days when they talk about it's the woman's, the woman was the problem. And oftentimes when they did that, it was because of how, if you understand the historicity of knowledge and how information was passed. When they talked about knowledge was a representation of the white man. So it was just the white man who had knowledge. If they were to filter it down, it would go to the next ethnic group, male, not female, because female were considered subpar. So any issues that were happening, whether physical or otherwise, the blame would now be placed on the female, because perhaps they would come across one or two that had women that had the infertility problems, but you probably had the next 10 males having the infertility problems, but they hid that. They knew how to support each other, because this has been a problem among men for a long time, and they fail to speak about it because of the it's a man's world that we live in. It is a very real reality. I know that part and parcel that these women who are fertile are saying, look here, they realize their parents, grandparents for decades, centuries, have suffered at the hands of men abandoning the women. And we're not talking about the women who hide the child from the man. We're talking about the fact that men, if you admit it, many of you are bums. No disrespect, no shade. Many of you are bums. I remember listening to a guy. Guy said he was speaking with quite a number of men. He's a fairly young guy. He said, the man says, once I leave you as a woman, I leave the child, even if it is my child. I heard him for myself. He said, once we leave, they don't want to admit that once the woman leaves or they leave the woman, they also leave the child. Maybe because they didn't give birth, they don't have that connection with the child. I don't know what it is. But many men, they don't necessarily have that formidable, staying, lasting love as how good mothers, and I make sure to stress good mothers, have for their children. Even the ones that are bad will still not necessarily abandon fully. Some bad, not all bad ones. So men, you need to go and get help to deal with the infertility problem. Guys, you know what to do. Rate TikTok and YouTube. Subscribe. Give me one of those lines. Follow me on Instagram.